Hello, welcome to American Christian or Christian American once again. If you would please hit that subscribe button, that way you can get the videos faster. And if you like the video, please push like and maybe even share a video with somebody else. That way we can get these videos out there. Also, if you haven't seen my videos before, if this is your first time, well, welcome. But I would encourage you to go back to some of my earlier videos so you can get more context. Now you can still go ahead and watch this one if you choose. But the next one I'm going to do is going to be tied to this. So it'd be important to watch this one first. But if you can go back and check those out, that'd be great. Now, looking at the title, Make America Great Again. And for whom? That is a question, isn't it? Can America be great again, or was it ever great? Well, it depends on who's talking. Because Make America Great Again is a pushback to white supremacy, making white people superior, putting the scales tilted towards white people to make America a white nation again. And it really has always been, but to move more towards that, to abolish many of the progress that has happened, to get rid of immigrants that may taint the bloodline, so to speak. That's what it's all about. This nation built a nation for white people, no one else. It was established for white people. We have a constitution that is for white people. You say, well, no, the Constitution says all men are created equal. Who in the world do you think they were talking about? They weren't talking about African American people. They were 2/3 of a person in the Constitution. You think they were created equal? Well, not if they're 2/3. You think they were talking about the Native Americans? They were murdering them and stealing their land, according to the doctrine of discovery. So who were they talking about? They were talking about people who look like me. Now, I don't include myself in those groups. I want to be with the other people. I want to be with the group of people that includes everybody, because we're all human beings created by God. I don't want to be with people who think they're better than everybody else. But that's what this movement, MAGA movement, is. Make America Great Again. So the question is, was it ever great? It was great for some people. But even within those some people, there was exclusionaries. Women were not allowed to participate in the process. Only white men who owned land. So even people who didn't own land were not able to vote in the system. And we're going to go farther than that. I've got a couple of videos you're going to watch, and then we're going to talk about them. So let's go on to those. One video is a person talking about a speech by Frederick Douglass. You'll find this interesting. And then another one where I go over reading some information that will also help us in our discussion.
Let's talk about one of the most quoted speeches in American history, and one I'm sure you heard a lot over the weekend, or I hope you did. Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July, delivered on July 5th, 1852. Because I think that what people still miss about the speech is what Douglass was really doing. Because to even give that speech, let alone have it heard, he had to step onto something of a rhetorical minefield. He wasn't just challenging slavery. He was navigating a national mythology so thick, so sacred, that to reject it outright would have ensured silence, would have made sure that no one would have paid any attention to him. So this is about how Douglass used the only language white Americans allowed him, and how he then used that language against him. Hey folks, I'm Tad Sturmer. I'm an historian of the United States and the American Revolution, and the author of the forthcoming A Resistance History of the United States. The opening of Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July speech. It feels oddly reverent. Douglass calls the founders brave men, praises the saving principles of the Declaration, and uses a famous, important metaphor. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document, the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. Notice it doesn't say our, your nation's destiny. But it almost reads like a celebration. It isn't. It's the same Douglass who 3 years later in My Bondage and My Freedom calls those same founders slaveholders and traffickers in the bodies and souls of men, men who could not stand up to the simple claims of justice. That's not to think of it as rhetorical inconsistency. It's a clear strategy. In 1852, Douglass was addressing a mostly white, northern, civic-minded audience in Rochester, New York. And in the public sphere of 1852, the founders weren't just respected, they were holy. The revolution wasn't history, it was gospel. So he had to speak that language. He had to preach that gospel because he understood a truth we still don't teach. The patriot myth had become the national religion. And that religion had a priest, George Bancroft. By 1852, Bancroft, whose idea of history was created by the German Romantic nationalists, we could talk about that, had published, I think, 7 volumes of his history of the United States. The sprawling account of how America fits into divine destiny, particularly focusing on the American Revolution. He described the founders not just as flawed men, or not at all as flawed men, but as instruments of God, of providence. He claimed the American Revolution was the consecration of reason in human affairs. And Bancroft's influence cannot be overstated. We're still seeing it and hearing it and feeling it today. His books were treated as historical scripture, which has now fueled popular culture after World War II. His version of the revolution saturated school books in the 19th century, 4th of July sermons, children's readers, and the political rhetoric of Whigs and Democrats alike. So by the time Douglas rose to speak in Rochester in 1852, Bancroft's founding myth had already taken over the national imagination. And that myth demanded that all public arguments conform to it, even those that opposed slavery. And it's so powerful that it still shapes American historical consciousness today. We can go down the list, particularly when it comes to Christian nationalism and white nationalism. And that's what Douglas was up against. But the speech, it really begins in the middle, when you're reading it or when you're listening to it. After the mythic nods to the revolution, he pivots. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. And from there, he just dismantles the very legacy that he just invoked. He declares the national celebration a sham, calls the founders' principles flagrantly violated, and reminds his audience, and this is where it hits, there is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States. That's your first republic. That's its epitaph. There's no more flattery. There's no more myth. The rest of the speech is a controlled demolition. And the power of that demolition rests on the fact that Douglas first spoke in the audience's native language before exposing it as a fraud. He's in the temple overturning the tables of the money changers. But he never spoke that way again. As the years passed, especially after the Civil War, he abandoned any reverent framing of the founders. No, 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 no. In his 1876 oration in memory of Abraham Lincoln, which he delivered at the Freedmen's Monument, Douglas offered a final assessment of the founding generation. The founding fathers were great men, to be sure, but they were also great compromisers, especially on the question of slavery. Let's dig into that a little bit. In calling them great compromisers, I don't think that Douglas was praising their political flexibility. He wasn't referring to compromise as mutual respect or the American genius of deliberative democracy. I think he meant compromisers in the older, unflattering sense. Those who exposed something to danger or disrepute for personal gain. Those who sold out the republic's moral foundation to preserve their own wealth, comfort, and property and other human beings. They didn't compromise for America. They compromised America. And Douglas knew it. So by the 1880s, Douglas saw how limited rhetorical appeals to conscience had been, how playing the game of moving the needle, encouraging reform from within, of working within the comfort zone, don't turn them off, of white people, had failed to achieve meaningful change, had failed to resist the constant abuse of authority that was the First Republic, just operating as it was intended. In memorializing John Brown, he said, "While I live, John Brown shall not be slandered. His zeal in the cause of my race was far greater than mine. It was as the burning sun to my taper light." Taper being just a small candle. Douglas understood that moral clarity wasn't enough. Liberation didn't come from speeches that made white people feel better about themselves. It came from rupture, from sacrifice, from war, from the unmaking of the old order, from the destruction of the First Republic. Today, the same founding myth Douglas had to speak through in 1852 is not just with us. It's dominating how we approach the past and its relationship to the present. The current regime is doing exactly what the founders did, using patriotic exceptionalism to justify an exclusionary authoritarian nationalism. And they're doing it with the full power of the state and its cultural collaborators. And it isn't just historical distortion. It's political infrastructure. And the language they're using? It's the language of Bancroft. The liturgy of the founders. The same script Douglas was forced to recite in 1852. The same one Lincoln had to dismantle to end slavery. The difference? Oh, now it's being used with full awareness to silence dissent, to erase memory, and define citizenship through whiteness, conformity, loyalty to a myth. And that's the point. This was always what the founders had intended, folks. Their version of liberty was not universal. It was exclusionary by design. Their republic was built for property-owning white men and only them. Today's regime doesn't distort that vision, it fulfills it. So when critics today frame their resistance in the founders' language, when they say we must return to our founding ideals or the Constitution gives us the tools to fix this, they are already on the defensive. They're arguing from within the same system that was designed to exclude them. Douglas understood that. Eventually, Lincoln did too. So the question isn't whether we're living through a return to the founding. We are. That's making America great again. That's the point. The question is whether we'll keep pretending the founders left us the tools to fix this, or whether we'll finally admit that the founding is the crisis. So what do we do with the speech? What do we do with Douglas in 1852? Well, we remember that it's brilliant. We remember that it's also strategic. We remember that it was compelled. It was made necessary by a system that allowed no other language to be heard. And we remember that Douglas moved on. He stopped speaking the language of myth. He stopped trying to redeem the founders. He stopped trying to work comfortably through that audience. And he started building a new patriotism, rooted not in 1776, but in 1865 and beyond. That's the Douglas we need now. Because truth doesn't need myth to make it righteous. And resistance doesn't need permission from the past. It needs only our courage to break the spell, to disenthrall ourselves, so we can fight back on our terms, not theirs.
It is entitled, Why Did South Carolina Continue to Select Their Presidential Electors by Legislative Choice Until After the Civil War? So looking back through history, the Electoral College, many of the states did not at first actually have a popular vote to decide the electors for president. Instead, many states chose electors by having the state legislative branch choose the electors for their state, with only a few of the states putting the decision to the popular vote. For example, in the 1800 election of Thomas Jefferson, only Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, and Rhode Island had the popular vote, with all other states having the legislative assembly decide the electors except for Tennessee, which had a unique system. However, over the course of a couple of decades, most states switched to the popular vote, excepting South Carolina. South Carolina continued to have the legislative body choose the electors all the way until the end of the Civil War, whereupon they started using the popular vote to decide electors. What were the reasons for South Carolina to use the popular vote to decide the electors for so long compared to other states? And why did they finally decide to put the decision to the popular vote in the future after the Civil War? It was a power move, a way to exploit the rules in their favor. Congress, for the first 50 years of the Union, did not say exactly when you had to select your electors. There was a window. South Carolina would postpone their selection until near the end of that window. In a tight race, the combination of selecting near the end of the process and the state legislative controlling the selection allows South Carolina politicians a greater ability to affect the race. This allowed them to make deals, barter, and generally have overly representative voice in national policies. At least it's a strategy for such. In Congress in 1845, therefore, adopted a uniform day on which all states were to choose their electors. That day, the Tuesday following the first Monday in November, in years divisible by 4, continues to be the day on which all states now conduct their presidential elections. All right, well, I think back, I'm 60 years old now, and I think back in my educational process, and I was taught so many things about the founding fathers and the way our country is set up and the way things work and how good it is and what a great country this is. America's the greatest country in the world and all this blah, 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 all this propaganda. It's not. It's not the greatest country in the world. It has a lot of problems. And a lot of problems is because the people who created this country created a country that was for white people only. Now, it doesn't mean that this is the only country who has had this issue, but the United States has carried this thing, to a horrific level. And probably the only other place I can think of that has been as bad is South Africa. And that was horrible because the white people were a smaller group of people and oppressed the larger population, to which they were not even native born. Now, of course, the white people there today are native born, but there's still a problem with white people controlling most of the land, and they're in a minority in that land. Now, they were born there, they're part of that country, but they should become part of a unified country together, which means that everybody has something to say, everybody's part of it, everybody should be working towards the same goal. That's not the United States. The United States, see, I don't buy into this thing with the founding fathers being such a wonderful group of people. They weren't. They were slave owners. They had an agenda. And when it comes down to the Revolutionary War, breaking away from England, was that really such a great move? Did that make this country any better? I don't see it. Now, I'm not advocating, I don't believe in having a monarchy. Okay? I'm not advocating that. What I am saying, look at countries like Canada and Australia in many ways. They are far superior in the way they run their governments. And they didn't separate from England, but they grew out from them. Was that the right choice? Perhaps. Again, I'm not sitting here saying we should have stayed with England, but I want you to think about it. They went on different paths. This country has gone on a path of greed and power. It has gone under a path of oppressing people with darker skin colors, of stealing land from the Native Americans, almost wiping them out. Now, yes, there were problems with Canada and the Europeans coming in there and other places, but they certainly have come a lot farther than we have, a lot faster. It doesn't mean that they're perfect, but we have so much mess in this country. Now, people who look like me are just ignoring it. They don't think it really exists. Not everybody, but too many. There are too many people who will do harm because they are still racist. They are still power hungry. They are still greedy. They are part of white Christian nationalism. And white Christian nationalism will do what? White Christian nationalism is all about power and greed. It's not about Christianity. They twist the word of God till it's unrecognizable. Christianity is real. God is real. God is the creator of everything. And it's not a white religion, folks. People say, well, it's a white religion. No, it's not. It was not given to white people because white people weren't first. White people weren't the first people. We came along later. It is when Catholicism started twisting the word of God and therefore other things, it became a distorted view of Christianity, and that is white, but not the original church, not of the people who are in the Bible. That was not white people, folks. There is no religion that was established white people. Okay? That doesn't make us less of human beings. We're still human beings. We only make up 15 to 18% of the population. Where do you think we were first? How did we get all these other skin colors and skin tones? That isn't coming from us. We are genetically impossible of creating other skin tones. Only a medium brown skinned people could have created all the different varieties of people. And I talk about the documentation in episode 1. If you haven't seen it, go back. This country is not a great country. And in fact, if you think about it, the power was kept away from the people in so many ways. We talked about, I read there, we talked about many states didn't use the popular vote. They didn't trust the people to have a popular vote. And we are a democracy? See, no, we're a republic. And there are many things they actually wanted to look like a democracy, but it really wasn't. Think about these things. So many states didn't use the popular vote. They used electors. They balanced it out by so the southern states could get power. And when they ran for president, they didn't have like the Democrat and Republican Party so much. They had two candidates, opposite views. And when one candidate won, the other one became the vice president. So if this candidate dies, you get the same guy you didn't want in the first place. How is that democracy? And the senators were not elected by people. They were elected by legislatures. Again, keeping power. Because even if the people voted for people in the House, the senators who they selected would keep it where they wanted it. That's especially how the southern states would maintain power when it comes to slavery and other things that went on. Did we really have a democratic system? Do we today? However, one thing the Constitution did allow is for changes. And we have made certain amendments that have improved it. Like, for instance, allowing women to vote, allowing African Americans to vote. How that was a bloody change because all the people who died were killed. I'm not using the English term bloody. I'm talking about the blood that was spilled for these people trying to get the right to vote. We also have changed some things with elections. So the president they choose somebody from their party to run as vice president, and they run against somebody else who's done the same thing. Senators are elected by the people. But is it really a democratic system that works? Our system is very fragmented and very broken. And as we see right now with Donald Trump, who is actually a dictator in many ways, he is trying to take over everything. Although we must clearly understand that it's not Donald Trump really in of itself. It's white Christian nationalism who is organized around Donald Trump. Donald Trump's only fulfilling them. If you get rid of Donald Trump, have we solved the problem? Not really. Although he is a problem, a major problem, that white Christian nationalism is trying to bring us back to a more powerful white controlled country. Donald Trump has even recently, now this video is not going to be played right away, it's going to be played a few months later, but he recently talked about federalizing New York if a liberal mayor. So the choice of the people here. With him in power, there is no choice. And we're going back to a much less of a democracy. So can the system be fixed? Maybe. In the next video, I'm going to offer an alternative system. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to go to what I'm talking about. We could stay with the system we got and make some adaptations. I just want to give you an alternative view in order to understand things better. And so don't get upset with me saying, oh, he's going this way. No, doesn't mean we have to go that way, but I want you to look at some ideas of a different style of system and to see how it could work to improve things. And if nothing else, maybe it will help you to view our system and to change it in ways that would be better for people. Like, for instance, instead of having a senator represent the whole state, you have two senators. Have one senator represent half the state and the other senator represent the other half of the state, whether it's divided by population or divided by land space. Because then you have different people voting for those senators at different times, not the same people. So that's just one thing I would suggest. I want you to think about this. What would make America truly great? Because really it has never been great. What would make America a leader of the free world? Because it has military might and can stomp on a lot of other people? Or could we simply be a leader of the free world because we actually do cherish human rights? We actually cherish all the citizens of this country. Could we be a free leader of the free world because we don't look at each other and divide up because of the way we look? That being white is not a problem. Being African American is not a problem. Being Asian American is not a problem. When we start looking at the human race instead of this imaginary, fictitious white race, black race, Asian race, they don't exist, folks. We're 99.9% identical. They don't exist. We're one race. Get over it. We are one race, 99.9% identical. That 1/10 of a percent decides your skin color, decides your what you're going to look like, your hair structure, your hair, your eye color, your height, your if you're going to be stocky or going to be thin, whether a woman's going to have large breasts, small breasts, a man's going to have a large penis, small penis, all that stuff, all decided in that small percentage. We are all human beings, folks, all of us. What little percentage of our DNA goes towards our differences is meaningless to divide us up. We are human beings. And we have to stop mocking each other and making fun of each other and belittling each other for any reason, whether it's a skin color, whether it's the height of we are, whether we're a man is a thin, frail man or a big, stocky man. It doesn't matter. Each person is a valuable human being, and that's how they need to be looked at and cherished. And judge them according to their actions, not according to just your preconceived notions and even their actions. Sometimes they have a really bad day or they have maybe an attitude towards something. That doesn't mean that in totality that they're just a bad person. We have those people, folks, who don't care. But we have to start coming together. I hope we'll do that. I hope we'll think about that speech. Go back and listen to that speech about Frederick Douglass, what he was saying. In the next video, we're going to talk about these things, about an alternate possibility. Until the next time on American Christian or Christian American.